now that we're here for the first time in, again, what feels like forever ago. Like I said, Julian, you and I were, the last time we got a chance to actually catch up in person, we were running about the Las Vegas Strip on the mornings for our sort of VFit run group at, I believe, AWS reInvent 2019. So lots happened since then, because I think you'd been with AWS at that time, but
yeah,
we go way back. But for folks that aren't lucky enough to know you, let's have you introduce yourself and where we can find you online. Then we're going to jump in and talk about all sorts of serverless goodness.
Certainly. Well, Eric, first of all, thanks for inviting me. DiscoPosse podcast. How awesome is that? How lucky I am. I've been listening to many years for all your great interviews, and to think I get to be on the DiscoPosse podcast. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Julian Wood. I'm a senior developer advocate for AWS Serverless. So I work literally within the AWS Serverless product team within AWS. So we develop products like Lambda and API Gateway, and link up with lots of all the other serverless products. I mean, there are things from EventBridge and their queues and things. I'm sure we'll go into all the kind of tech later. But yeah, I've been at AWS, I think, just over a year, or years and probably 4 months. And so yeah, at reInvent last year, 2 years ago, 2019, in the normal times. Yeah, that's the last time we caught up. And yeah, that VFit runs are the cool things that actually you started, I don't know, many years ago at VMworlds in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember yourself, myself, and Alaric Davies, I think,
yes,
were on the very first run, and I didn't plan on doing this, and standing in some pub one evening, and someone goes, "Do you fancy doing a run tomorrow morning?" What are you talking about? And off we did, yeah.
Yeah, we did a lot of miles together over the course of years, or kilometers for those folks that are like you and I that still observe the metric system, like 98% of the world. Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, it's San Francisco. Yeah, and it was funny. Not only did we go for a run, which probably seemed like a rather ungood idea at the time, especially because we were at the pub discussing it, and then
exactly.
And then at the end of the run, we actually felt so good and said, "Hey, do you want to just have a go at it tomorrow?" And we actually made it a daily event for the whole stretch. And it's been so at every event that I've been to ever since, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And you've continued it with so many different events that you've attended. And yeah, it's just so cool to chat to people from, I mean, you have no idea who's going to pitch up in the morning, and just to chat about a conference you're at and get different people's opinions and what they're liking, not liking. And yeah, and a breath of fresh air, and gets the cobwebs out from the night before, and
that's right,
starts the day. Yeah, it's crazy, but good fun.
So imagine the changes that have been around in, obviously the world has been very different in that we couldn't get a chance to get together at reInvent 2020, but there was an inordinate amount of really amazing announcements in serverless across the entire set of platforms. It was just a fire hose of great stuff that was coming. I loved Andy's keynote. I actually loved the style. So the AWS reInvent, just the whole delivery of it was really, really well done, because it felt truly like the reInvent keynotes that, they're beautifully styled. The delivery is genuine, and I've always fancied the way that they do it, because there's such a powerful set of human stories, very customer centric and customer driven. And so the way that it's done, and I'm assuming that there was like a small studio audience that was there. And it was funny, a lot of people online were like, "Oh, I really don't like the canned applause." I'm like, well, I don't believe it's canned applause. I think it's real applause. And if you didn't have it, you'd be horrified at what it's like listening to a 3-hour keynote with no interruptions other than that person's voice. So it was It was a really, really well done. It was very dynamic. And what I love is that it was natural. Like you could hear tripping up. It wasn't overly produced. But no matter how you slice it, good on Andy and Werner and all the folks to be able to stand up there and do that stuff so beautifully and naturally for so long. And that's one day a year. I can only imagine the preparation and all the teams behind it. So
I know that must be amazing. I mean, Andy Jassy is incredible. I think just from that, I mean, let's call it a performance, that he literally speaks for 3 hours it's
Yeah.
live. He's obviously got notes and things of that. But the thing that amazes me is I work just within the serverless product space. And so, okay, I would say I'm moderately au fait with everything that's going on in serverless because it's so broad. Andy delivers a 3-hour keynote. He covers all of the service, all of the, big, huge announcements across all of these services, and delivers it with conviction and knowledge and understanding, and just, I mean, it is incredible. And I'm sure a lot of it's, pre-written and, notes. I mean, he must prepare for this for days and days and days. But, he's a technical guy. He knows the stuff. He understands the stuff. I mean, even I know internally all the stuff that bubbles up to Andy. And I know there many times he's saying, oh, that division over there, you need to talk to this division over there, or have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? So yeah, he's amazing. So, I mean, for how many years he's been at Amazon, and yeah, he still cracks out a 3-hour keynote with, yeah, customer stories, the whole kind of thing. Yeah, amazing. And I mean, really, this keynote as well was, serverless was very much front and center, where actually in reInvent 2019, which was my first reInvent as an employee, within Andy's keynote, there weren't as many serverless announcements, and people were like, oh, is this the sort of the peak of serverless that's kind of happened? And I mean, just
Yeah,
no
we've
reason for
already
that.
gone beyond the hype cycle, right? Oh no.
Possibly, but there's just so much going on at AWS, and Andy and his team obviously have to pick and choose what goes into the keynotes. But there are always announcements, and yeah, this year just serverless, sort of rediscovered the keynote again, and yeah, for no other reason than yeah, there's just cool stuff to talk about, and yeah, I mean, even though there's so much announced in the keynote, it was cool to see that Andy, really highlighting the value of serverless, and then some weird cool kind of things like 50% of all new services built on AWS use Lambda, and
Right.
that's a kind of thing. So forget even the announcements that they were doing, but just yeah, AWS builds services, and we building stuff on Lambda. We'll go into Lambda as our compute offering, but yeah, it just shows you the massive scale of this massive scale and the opportunity, yeah, of this funny thing called serverless.
And the interesting thing of serverless from its inception, of course, when we say serverless, it is literally like the first thing that jumps into everybody's mind is Lambda. Like you defined what the serverless would become as a nomenclature. Like we introduced it to the world, and Lambda was this first place. And it's funny in how over time we've seen Lambda itself evolve so much to what it extends into, the power of the platform itself. I mean, I still get people who will say like, oh, they're worried about the amount of runtime and cold starts and all of this stuff that we've hung on to it in a way. You almost need like a Snopes for serverless to like catch up what is actually not real. It's pure mythology at this point.
Yeah.
They're sort of urban legends that have survived far beyond where they've been surpassed technically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of our challenges. I mean, even particularly in my role, I mean, my role's a technical role to help people understand serverless. And yeah, a lot of that is the sort of just old time thinking. And I mean, we can't complain that customers have that at times, because yeah, it is just evolving and changing all the time. And it is also tough for customers to be able to change their thinking and update their best practices and do all this kind of thing. But the opportunity there at the same time is just is just incredible. I mean, our sort of philosophy on the serverless thing is, it's the fastest way to build a modern application. And interesting, serverless is a term. It's obviously as silly as cloud is a term. When Lambda was announced, serverless was not mentioned at all. It was never thought of as a serverless thing. When it was announced, it was actually all about event-driven computing, which it very clearly still is all about. And actually, I mean, just for a history lesson, Lambda was born out of the S3 team, and customers were thinking, we were running all these little batch jobs. When somebody was uploading a file to S3, we wanted to do something with it.
Oh,
and
right,
so,
yeah.
the S3 team were like, well, yeah, we want to sort of fix that kind of thing. So how are they going to hook it up? How are they going to hook it up? And then the whole idea was like, hang on, let's start thinking about events. Yes, people are uploading a file to S3, but it could, there's so many other things that can generate events. What if we could just have a little piece of compute that could run based on that event? And so Lambda was born. And, the years now that Lambda's been running, the huge amount of use cases that it's gone from is literally been mind-blowing. And I mean, the goal is not just to make infrastructure cheaper. That's the kind of thing. It's not just our sort of internal trick to drive utilization to Amazon servers. It's not to just overload or offload workloads from data centers. The whole thing is about serverless is really just helping builders go faster. And that's the whole idea of it. And yes, the infrastructure, melting away and all that kind of thing. But the idea of serverless from two different components, one being the compute with Lambda and one just connecting with this myriad of all other services. But what's the idea? Developers want to build code. They want to ship it quickly. They want to go prototype to production as quick as they can. And that's the ethos of serverless, is to just make life simple for developers to build their stuff and be successful.
But, and as somebody who's been in the data center and cloud space for, I've done a few, as you can tell by the lines under my eyes, a few hard decades in running production environments. And what was interesting to see was the way that developers really did do a lot of sort of leading how the infrastructure teams would react and operate. And it was always that way, right? Developers were looking for the way to do something better, more effectively, more efficiently. And when you've got great development teams, you really want to empower them and you want them to do that stuff. But now what ended up happening at that time was sort of virtualization upended the mid-frame and the mainframe folks. They're like, oh, this distributed computing thing is crazy. And then it became virtualization, and then it became containerization. And then it became now this idea of serverless. But event-driven infrastructure is such a fantastic thing because we had all of these tools and shims and VMs living all over the place, just sitting there watching, and for those that weren't already doing stuff around message queuing and at that layer, this was a great way to like, hey, it was like, if this, then that for everything else. Yeah. And so I love that when we've done now for operations teams, and I see that as kind of one of the primary audience that is the slowest to adapt and adopt, is that we've really taught them that this is one less thing to manage. It allows you to integrate much easier to other adjacent services. And also, it excited them again about getting into code because it was effectively sort of micro coding that you could do. You could just create this simple function and like, oh, wow, it works. And I remember I got my first IoT button and you like click the little button and it would do a thing somewhere. And I was like, this is amazing. This is a lot of fun. And it was this neat little project. And it reminded me again that little scripts, little batches, little processes in this format was all of a sudden this fantastic form factor and way to deliver it. And again, what was the real problem we were solving? I didn't want to have a virtual machine sitting there for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, so that every 3 days somebody drops a file somewhere and I've got to do 3 things to it. It just didn't make sense. So serverless just introduced such a really new methodology for folks. And I love. So let's talk about it. I'm curious on your side, because you also are from an ops background, architecture. You've done an incredible amount of stuff. You've been very deep into the virtualization ecosystem and the application ecosystem. So what's the advocacy, sort of success rate as you bring people forward? Because I'm curious on how the audience is going, because I think it's growing, but I know it has been a bit of a slog.
Yeah. Interestingly, as you say, I come from an infrastructure background. Before joining AWS, I was on the customer side. So, I haven't worked for a so-called vendor before. And my infrastructure roots are literally, if we're going really back, way back when, it's Novell and into Windows, and I've done a lot of Microsoft kind of stuff. And racking servers and, switches and firewalls and, architecture stuff where, literally 75% of the product is not even building the VMs, but it's, deciding on the firewall rules and, trying to predict a year or 2 or 3 in advance how big a database needs to be, or how many app servers you're going to need, or, how big your HCI cluster needs to be, or do we need a new switch? Do the switch ports have enough throughput on the SAN or the NAS? I mean, all this kind of stuff. And when Lambda came out and AWS with serverless, I didn't do much initially with it, but there was this nagging thing in the back of my head, which was just the sort of sense of actually relief that even myself as an infrastructure person, I always felt as though we were always just slightly doing a disservice to people who were building stuff, because we were often either a blocker or apps people didn't understand infrastructure. And that was frustrating for me, because I wanted them to understand infrastructure, because infrastructure can do great, amazing things, and it's scalable and it's performance and it's secure and all these kind of things. But there's a lot of work that application people need to do to achieve that. And normally it's throw a ticket over the wall and I need X number of VMs. And if you're lucky, you've got some cool developers who understand that infrastructure and they know how stuff connects together and they can do some planning and all this kind of thing. But all the time I spent was literally hand-holding developers and project managers and other architects to design all this infrastructure for scale and disaster recovery and for all this kind of thing. And so when serverless and Lambda kicked off, and the ability for Lambda to then be the glue to connect a whole bunch of different services together, and even better, forget, let's rather not have Lambda functions at all and rather have these services talk to each other. And I don't have to provision a certificate. I don't have to manage that certificate. I don't need to patch anything. If it doesn't run, I don't pay for anything. And it's just, you've literally got this compute for all. I mean, it sounds like a horrible buzzword, but it is sort of giving the whole world a big distributed computer which they can do anything with, but they don't have to understand distributed computing. And so back to the infrastructure thing, that's my light bulb. The light bulb went off, and it was just all my years as an infrastructure person, I loved getting involved in the virtualization and the VMware community, and learning from people and trying to help people out. But ultimately, looking after that infrastructure, there are cloud scale better ways of doing it. And when this opportunity with AWS came up, it was just like, oh wow, I jump for that. I love the technical stuff. I love talking, love presenting. And so yeah, this job came up is to literally advance and help people understand and love serverless as much as I do. And yeah, I mean, it's honestly going like gangbusters. And just every single year, we get more use cases. The little tweaks, some of the small little tweaks just open up more workloads. As you were saying earlier on in the beginning, where there's these sort of myths that have happened, and you definitely can't use serverless, or you definitely can't use Lambda for this, or it's insecure, or it doesn't perform, or this kind of thing. AWS and the whole ecosystem and partners as well are just chipping away at those little use cases to just continually make it better, make it bigger, better, faster, more, and cheaper. And yeah, it's just this continual evolvement that allows literally developers to ship code quicker, and to give business this amazing agility to do a number of things. One, as I said before, this prototype to production, that in many cases, if you create something in a prototype and you want to push it into production, it's not like okay, hell, now how are we going to actually really architect this thing to be in production and have disaster recovery and have backups and all this kind of thing? Often with a lot of serverless ways of building things, well, whether a function runs once or 1,000 times, you don't need to worry about that scale. And that's powerful and just invigorating.
Yeah, the real thing that it's a beautiful pairing of availability and readiness. So availability of infrastructure, of capabilities, of adjacent services, the backing services that ultimately enable you to do more than just compute. And, so adding networking security, bringing your data there, because ultimately data gravity is one of the most profound choosers of where your apps will really be. But then to go one step further, which was really the whole idea of where I had, what can we do beyond just this stuff in the world where people can leverage this? And you and I we were blogging, and we were trying to sort of like look to what's next. And quite often you'd find yourself a little alone on that path. But then a year later, all of a sudden you see you're getting 15, 20 reads a day on some blog that you wrote from VMworld from 3 years ago, and you realize because the world caught up. Yeah. And so it was this beautiful combination of, like I said, of availability and now readiness, that the world is, we've understood, we're far beyond the rent versus buy arguments, the pets versus cattle argument, all the something versus somethings. Look, the reality is we're here and it's there to be consumed. And people are, especially now, when we don't have, physical access to offices and data centers in the same way that we did a year plus ago, it was a beautiful opportunity for the world to do something with what they had available. Like, let's take what we've got and do something amazing with it. And we've seen it come out in what, companies that are doing vaccines, that are, government agencies are leveraging people getting access to services. I speak to people all the time, and that's the thing. They're like, I didn't have to get in to my data center to stand up stuff. I could spin up. My developers are all over the world. So now I can give them local access to things. I can give them anywhere access to things. So it really was this beautiful thing, that.
Yeah. And I really love the way that it actually came often more from a bottom-up approach. And there are many big many big examples of top-down approaches where a CIO or a CIO says, well, we're going to mandate moving to the cloud for X, Y, Z number of kind of things. And that is super important in any company. Top-down leadership and drive for that really helps with any kind of project forward. But what I liked about the part of the pandemic was that engineers and architects and developers could literally have the suite of services at their fingertips, and literally sitting at home with nothing but an internet connection and a laptop. They could either scale their compute or their services to take unprecedented demand, where literally within days or weeks nobody could have predicted how things were going to change, and just to be able to do that for your customers, or do that for your staff, or do that for your business. And so be able to handle that massive scale. And then also the other way around, for many companies are suffering, or many companies are just wanting to they couldn't do some kind of things. And a serverless approach is always pay-per-use. And there are amazing stories of companies who were just able to shrink their IT spend from an infrastructure point of view and their compute point of view, really down to the bare minimum, because maybe one part of their business isn't doing anything anymore, and another part of their business is going absolutely gangbusters. And as a good example, if you look up on the interwebs, Liberty IT, and they're an insurance company, and they're fully into serverless. And there's a great reInvent presentation which they do, and they talk about some parts of their business where they were doing claims literally shot up overnight. And if they were using traditional infrastructure, that was going to take an enormous amount of computing power and just racking and stacking and sorting that all out. And because of a serverless, well, not even racking and stacking, even setting up EC2 instances. Hell, I'm showing my age. Just immediately talk about the racking and stacking. It's like EC2, there's no racking and stacking. Oh dear. But yeah, just being able to scale up. And then other parts of their business, they said, they just didn't need to do X, Y, and Z. And so they could just scale that down. And that just gives, it gives agility and power. But, it was developers who could come up with that. And they could say, they've been tinkering around with this. And they say, well, if we did X, Y, and Z, we could scale this. And, developers are so close to the code, so close to the business problems as well. And yeah, just a great sort of upward things where anyone anywhere in the world, and we hear great stories of people needing a team of developers to stand something up, and all of a sudden they could literally take talent from anywhere in the world, and people are keen, people who want to learn, it's all there for the taking. And I love that it's spread out and given everyone an opportunity.
The one thing that I found that has been, like I said, the bit of the dragging forward of a lot of the infrastructure teams, in that, because not everybody has an organization that's making the best use of the new tool sets and capabilities that are there. So what you end up having is this weird push-pull factor of, ops folks that I speak to, especially in like the VMUG community, and you go out there and you say like, hey, have you thought about trying this, and you show them stuff like Terraform and AWS and all. Like I'm giving these talks and having a lot of fun, and it's amazing to me that even today here in 2021 now, that there are folks that have still not yet stood up their first, cloud instance, still have not used infrastructure as code, because it's just takes a while for some, depends on the size of the organization. But I really do see a shift that now everyone knows it's coming in their career, if not in their job today. So like career wise, we're seeing so many people are getting AWS certified, and there's so many great resources for that. And also, just there's so many, obviously Pluralsight, we've got a cloud guru, we've got lots of folks that are doing training, and there is no end of accessibility to this information. Like you said, the infrastructure before, if I want to try something out, I'm like, oh, I've got this crazy idea. I want to stand up a cluster of servers. Well, I've got to go and buy an Intel NUC, and I've got to buy 3 of them, of course, because you got to have a cluster. Then you need to switch. You need all this stuff. Right now I do AWS for my nomads. I run HashiCorp Nomad for containerization, and I'm doing a Pluralsight course again, for advanced Nomad stuff. And so every time I start to work on my demos, I click on the go button, and I provision through Terraform. I stand up a 6-node cluster across 2 different regions with AWS EC2, sets up all my security groups, sets up all my stuff for me. I do what I need to do, get my screenshots, take my video, and then I shut it down. It costs me about 98 cents every time I run it. And that's it. If I wanted to run it for 5 days, I could do so. If I wanted to run it for an hour, I can do so. And just that means that I can change my own trajectory in life, because I can educate myself on stuff that I couldn't before. Because if I wanted to kick the tires on it, you've got free tier, you've got all these different options. So anyways, I'm kind of in love with just the ability to unlock the power of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do also cooler and more interesting stuff at work. And there's always this talk about serverless also means no ops, and oh yes, we don't need operations people, and we don't need infrastructure people, and whatever. I mean, heck, I've come from an infrastructure background, literally jumping all in on serverless, and I always love being able to tell people that, well, of course things are going to change, things are going to evolve, but you're actually going to have more time to actually do the stuff that you care about. And if you're a DBA, for example, I know, many DBAs I've worked with before, their job often is building SQL servers or PostgreSQLs or that kind of thing, managing the backups of it, ensuring that the replication is there for DR, and then testing DR tests and, loading developer scripts to test all things. You want another copy of the SQL or MySQL server, Postgres, or whatever it is, standing that up. And that just goes ad continuum, when actually a DBA is, I want to be data modeling. I want to be making sure that my developers are using the best schema they can possibly doing. I want to make sure that, that developers, when they're choosing between SQL or NoSQL, that they're making the right choice based on X, Y, Z kind of thing. And that's just an example of a DBA, but there are examples from storage people and security people and all this kind of thing, where actually when a lot of that other stuff is just taken care of you, and you've got a database that's multi-AZ in the AWS world, where it's spread across multiple data centers, you don't have to worry about maintaining that state. Yet your DBAs just have more sort of impetus to do their job well, because they're not looking after all that other kind of stuff. And I think from a personal, love and productivity and inspiration for your own job, we all want to do something new. And sure, there are people who, have a bit of fear and trepidation about that, and quite rightly may be thinking, well, if I may lose my job, so I'm just going to keep on and be a blocker and do what I'm going to do. But yeah, the opportunity is there, and there's so much more that we can do if we just think of how early on we're still in cloud days. Never mind what the Twitter sphere says, or never mind what's in the the headlines on the pages or whatever. There's a vast amount of opportunity to do, and yeah, that's from a company kind of thing, doing cool stuff, but also very much personal is playing with new cool toys, which is always fun in my book.
Yeah, there's definitely it's like a continuous, I could be a science project every day, and it's just new fun stuff. I couldn't possibly fill my day, any better than with exploring, new services that are available, and even just like rediscovering new features and capabilities within those as we see more of the adjacent services that are getting connected together. And I think that's where why this is important for the technologists, because we can go in and life comes at you fast. You stood up EC2 and you did it a certain way. Now you go and like, oh, the UI looks different. Oh, there's different options. We've got new capabilities available. You've got other backing services, like you said, just operational stuff too. Before it was always like, run it there, but then you had all these sort of had to deal with third parties for integrations and for backups and such, and those are still always there, and they're great partners to work with. But then natively you have all these incredible internal services where you could be from ground up, or cloud up as it were, running entirely in the AWS ecosystem. And this becomes the thing that I'll say, because I'm not going to drag you into this, unfortunate opinion, right, is that we talk about lock-in as if it was this sort of horrifying thing. But in the end, we've all realized, I believe, that lock-in isn't a real thing. What you've always locked yourself into is the capabilities of the platform. So if I'm going to lock in, call me locked in on AWS, because I know that it's done in a way that only positive, forward-thinking things are occurring in the environment. It's never meant to hold you there and you're beholden to it. And in fact, I think it was Andy's keynote in 2019 or 2018, one of them. And he said, look, there's no legal lock-in. And that was a neat statement, because it said, like, you can just get up and go. It's on-demand infrastructure. So you have complete freedom. And the only thing that you will choose to do then is choose your tooling and the way that you interact with it. And we've been locked in since the moment we chose any technology. That's lock-in. People, I always tell people, are you married? Like, yep, you're locked in. Does it feel painful? No, you love it, right? It's like, okay, so stop arguing about lock-in. It's just, if I was locked into something that I knew was risked going away, that's locked in. That's an unfortunate feeling. But
absolutely. I mean, the sort of perceived idea of lock-in is all about the sort of value versus the switching costs. If you're getting good value from it and you're happy with that, job done. And that if something gives you value, go for it. And you maybe weigh that up against a future migration. But I mean, one of the values of serverless and with Lambda is really that agility and speed. Without having to manage, infrastructure servers, containers, clusters, all that kind of thing, you can get your idea or your experiment into testing and production quicker. So if you can iterate on your ideas, and maybe this is a silly idea, or maybe it's a great idea, but the point is you don't know until you try it. And so if you are going to decide to commit to something, and maybe that's going to be lock-in on something that's more traditional, and it's going to take you 3 to 6 weeks or even 1 week just to set up some infrastructure to do something, how are you going to try your idea out? And part of that taking over that infrastructure is to give you the tools that you can, in fact, mitigate your concerns about the lock-in, because the lock-in to the platform is also with that value. And if you can get value quicker, well, how about I've got 10 developers, each trying 10 different ways to do something in a week. And at the end of the week, everyone comes together and, works out their best ideas and off they goes. And, there may be ways you need to change how you do things, and some of the paths to success may be inhibited, or you maybe need a new tool. You've got another way to do that, and there are ways that you can integrate, certainly with Lambda, with a new thing called extensions as well, and use traditional tooling and things like that. But I mean, we never see ourselves as wanting to lock you into Lambda. We just for Lambda, never mind all the other serverless services, but we want to make it better to use it, that you want to use it, that that value is there for you. And ultimately, if you're also writing less code, you've got more portability, because if you've got a 10,000 line, 1 million line code base, and 80% of that is all talking to, even if it is open source, or even if it is other open kind of open kind of things, you still got to maintain that code. You still got to make sure it's secure. You got to make sure that code has got failures and retries and backoffs and all that kind of thing. And actually, if there was a way that you could probably remove half of your code, that if you then decided, you know what, that kind of service isn't working out for me, maybe you can just switch to another service with no code changes, or some AWS service you grow out of, well, use a third party. But if
Right.
you, even when you're locked into, or even if you're locked in or using a service and you've got a whole bunch of code, that creates stickiness. And if that code's sitting on EC2 or sitting on-prem or something, that's what limits your agility. While start using some other kind of stuff, and there's native integrations with things, well, cool, use the native integrations. That's going to give you way more agility to be able to move things around, and yes, swap out one auth provider for another, or a message queuing system for another.
Yeah, instead of having to have a 19-week, architectural program where you're trying to figure out how you're going to deploy all your servers on-prem and do all this stuff. And you and I have been through many of those. You're like, if you just want to run a proof of concept, you needed budget for the proof of concept because you were going to need to provision all these things and get teams together. And it's just such a great opportunity now to switch our thinking to, like you said, from prototype to production. But even just the fact that you can do rapid prototyping of infrastructure, not even code. So you don't even need to be worried about the app yet. I can rapidly prototype. I want to run, Fargate for EKS instead of just straight EKS. So let me do that. Right? I don't need to buy a server and do a thing. And it's just literally kick the tires on it, run it up. Yeah. I do a thing called Turbonomic Labs, just do like live streaming of different sort of tech stuff. And I did like Fargate versus, traditional EKS versus ECS, just to show like how easy it was. And in the course of an hour, I literally did all three of them. And then when I was done at the end of the hour, I tear it all down. So it shows you that somebody wants to try this stuff out. That broad accessibility is beautiful in that how quickly you can get to it. Now, the neat thing too, because I want to drill in on this idea of new ideas coming from the community. You've been doing the advocacy role. I'm seeing the open source integration, open source sort of real support is growing. It's actually Phil Estes, who just moved over to, he was from IBM. Phil's a fantastic fellow. He was on the podcast as well. You're seeing obviously Adrian Cockcroft, you got all these really great leaders in open source, and they're coming in. And so we're seeing that community effect also then bleed into capabilities and features and the way that people consume, AWS infrastructure. So for you, having been very community involved for a long time, how good does it feel when you can see those things coming to fruition, where people can bring an idea and then the team listens?
Yeah, that's one of the things I've been surprised about AWS, is how much they listen to customers and the community. And I know every company says that, and a lot do, and a lot, I'm sure, have great intentions about it. But AWS is extremely particular about the customer focus, and that has surprised me in a way that I just didn't expect. And AWS and Amazon is very much a written culture, so lots of documentation written about every kind of thing. And when we're developing a feature, for example, when I'm reading through the PR FAQs, which is our Amazon, you always write the FAQs and the press release beforehand, and so you write up what you're going to be delivering and then work back from that. And those mock press releases that you're writing will have customer references in that, and those customer references that are in there are actually product managers who've spoken to the customers and have said, well, this is what the customer wants, their percentages, their figures, their metrics, all this kind of thing. And so product managers and developers and everything spend a huge amount of time talking to customers and also talking to the community to generate and create all those products. And there's a certain percentage, I can't remember off the sort of top of my head, of I think it's like 90% of everything we release is based on customer feedback. And there's a huge internal process for managing all that feedback. And but then there's that leftover 10%. And AWS always likes to say that that's where we sort of invent on the customer's behalf, because sometimes customers are asking for one thing and they need one thing, but actually we could create something that's either even better, or we use this term of inventing on their behalf. And something like Lambda is that kind of thing, that we could have said, well, yes, we will do something for S3 and create an event-driven compute service for S3, but we could actually make this much bigger and make it open events for everything. Wow, that is groundbreaking. And also from the community perspective, having come up through the VMware community and having been a vExpert for many years of my life, and hanging out with great people like you and everything at VMworlds, that community is super interesting because it just connects people together. I think AWS, to be honest, has a difficult challenge with that as well, just because it is so broad and it is so vast. But the passion of the serverless hero, the vExpert equivalent in the AWS world is heroes, so AWS heroes, and you have data heroes and mobile heroes and things like that. And we have our serverless heroes, and these, ladies and gentlemen, are some of the most passionate people I know, and it is amazing to see the impact they have on some of the products and maybe even just some of the features that we do. That we come out, and a lot of it comes from early doors where we speak to some of these big customers, and then often when products are coming out, we are actively courting the feedback from our serverless heroes, and they will tell us warts and all, yes or no, this is not what I expected, or I would also like this, or I didn't like this, or that kind of thing. And I'm amazed on the number of internal calls I'm with where someone will pop out and go, well, what would our heroes say about this? Or a particular service hero, what would they, they may be interested in machine learning or something like that. And they say, oh, I wonder what they would think of that. And it's literally to the person. And yeah, it's amazing. And, AWS is, as I mentioned before, it's because it's so broad, it can probably, I suppose, tough to have a cohesive, just AWS community where in the real world, it's lots of different communities, but they all do sort of intersect. And yeah, we've got a passionate community people, and they are, they're amazing. And I love seeing what they're doing. And yeah, some of the stuff they do where we shake our heads and we go like, oh my word, I did not foresee that, but that is awesome, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm just thinking now, like I've actually had two of the AWS serverless heroes on the podcast. So Ben Keogh, Ben's a fan. We had a really great conversation talking about, we had a good chat on Twitter about Outposts, and he's super engaged, really, really talking about stuff. And it was really cool. And I said, hey, I'd love to actually have a full long form chat on what we just talked about, because you've got really great stuff to bring to the chat. And so we did. It was great. So Ben was fantastic. And then also Brian from begin.com, Brian LaRue. And Brian's also a fellow Canadian. So that's right. We're slowly taking over the IT world. But yeah, same thing. It was just really, really somebody who's very vocal and out there on customers' behalf, like a real true listener to the community, and then brings that in, surfaces what he's hearing, and then says, okay, I'm going to build a service. And then to have him be able to influence AWS proper, right? And so that's Absolutely. Cool that even though he's building a thing, which, most of the companies would be like, you got to be careful. He's building stuff that may be taking us, he's giving flexibility for other platforms. He's like, well, actually, no, they're very open to the fact that people love just the ability to come and go, the ability to get the most out of it while they're there.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like I said, as through work, I do a ton of work with AWS folks in the field, in the community. Of all things, I was representing Turbonomic, speaking at an AWS event, talking about HashiCorp products. So it was the most bizarre combination of things where none of it was really the thing that I do. But in the end, everybody supported it because they saw, well, that was the first time as well where AWS had an event where they accepted community speakers. And I was very lucky and proud to be able to be among some of the first crew that did that. And I'm seeing that's coming up more too, whereas before, obviously reInvent there's so many product announcements. It's not like we can fit in, community speaking slots, but at some of the road shows and some of the other local sort of quarterly tech events, I was seeing more, how are people using these services? And that was really cool to see this shift in the customer story, where it's being told by the customer with no impetus to do it other than the fact that they're excited about it.
Yeah, I love that. And even this reInvent 2020, that there are a number of just even within the serverless track, there are a number of customer stories from, I mentioned before, Liberty Mutual and Steadily, and I'm not going to mention the last one because I may get it wrong. I don't want to put them. I'm just thinking like, oh, they didn't do that. What are you talking about? But yeah, just and for them to be part of reInvent and be able to tell their stories. There's even a presentation by a serverless hero, Michael Hart, super clever guy who's done on CI/CD, and yeah. I mean, my job as a developer advocate is two ways. One is to create content to help people learn serverless. And the other way is to literally bring back feedback to the product teams. And we have regular meetings with, many of the product teams from, API Gateway and Step Functions and Event Bridge and SQS and SNS and all these kind of things. And is literally to take community feedback back to the product managers to make sure that we're building the best serverless products and features, but part of my job as well is to help scale through the heroes. And if we help them out and they come up with a cool story and they then help 10 other people out, I mean that's just that's like the human fan out of serverless knowledge, which I'm all for.
I got one real important question. Is Jeff Barr an android? Because how does he keep up with the amount that he's over his career? Like he's just produced such an incredible amount of content, and he's so involved too. Like I can only imagine what his calendar, has looked like over the years as he's really evolved the role.
I mean, even I know his team has scaled out a bit more just to be handle all the amount of services. But yeah, the sort of personal involvement he has, and there's a high bar for blog content at AWS. It's not just type something up, hit publish. And even looking at their requirements for doing some of their blog posts, this is deep down. We're going to be looking at it. We're going to be commenting on it. We're going to be, tearing it apart and coming back. So yeah, Jeff doesn't just write the blog posts as well from a fun after the fact perspective. He's writing the blog post before the feature is going to be announced, and yeah, his team is also, as with other blog writers, is poking those holes and going back to the PMs, going, ha, you want to say this, but in reality it's this. So I either sort it out or evolve the messaging.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is, again, like how tight the access is via product management to the customer. And I've worked, and I've talked to a lot of different companies, and especially folks through the podcast over time. And you'll see the most successful, rapid product adoption stories always come when you're strong listeners, when you're deeply involved with the customer throughout the development process, so that when you're coming to the market with something, it's already adopted. It's just a matter of scaling the adoption versus, go out, build a thing, and then let's find some customers that may like to use this because we think it's interesting. Especially at the scale that, like you said, there can't be one AWS community. I get asked all the time that people say, like, how many of your, customers do you think are using AWS? I said, easy. All of them. All of them, whether it's direct or indirect, we all, like, through some means, we are all sort of touching this infrastructure. So, I mean, I can't even imagine what the customer count is, and it's probably published out there somewhere, but it's a fantastic number. So there's no way that they could all have, like, hey, let's have an AWS user group. I think that's what reInvent is, the biggest AWS user group ever, and it's huge.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had to go back 4 years and you were sort of at the throes of, I should probably even a little bit further back, where blogging was really, you took an active role. You're like, not only were you blogging because you just were doing it out of, I'm just going to get this out, but you very much adapted to that. I can create content in advance of the need, which was such a beautiful change to watch versus a lot of bloggers don't. That's like the enterprise architecture of blogging, where you're actually, let me write about something that I know is important, in the same way that Jeff Barr is going and creating the blog in advance. You did that so well, Julian. And so 4 or 5 years ago, if you'd have thought to yourself, I'm going to be writing about serverless and developer advocacy as you're writing up something about, running Horizon on physical servers, could you ever have connected those two dots?
In one way, definitely not. I mean, absolutely. But in another way, yes, as a sort of obvious arc and trajectory as computing has evolved. And I remember I was very lucky to be invited as the keynote speaker for the UK VMUG, so UK National VMware User Group, and I did the keynote talk at the end of the day, which isn't normally a community member. I was just a customer, that kind of thing. And I did this vastly overcomplicated talk, which I just got so excited and I just packed way too many things into it. And that was me. I just got excited. There was just so much to talk about. Like they wanted something on the future of IT, and I'm like, well,
hold on to your
hats.
Mad.
Hold on to your hats, exactly. But I remember, and that was I think that was 2016 or something, and already I was talking about serverless then, and because even though I had played with serverless and I'd tinkered around with Lambda and that kind of thing, but it was just that. This is the future of how things are going to be easier for me personally, for everybody. And so, yeah, in one way, I could always see myself writing something that's going to be useful, but it's always something that's going to be useful for people in the future. And I was always very particular about, launch blogs we used to do, if we were on the beta for some upcoming announcement, I was very particular on always writing about the why.
Right.
So, there would be 10 people who would get all access to the same kind of things and the same kind of, marketing information and product information to write about. And, no disrespect to anybody else, but they would, list all the features, and, that is always super important to get out there. But my ethos was always, why is this important? Why does X feature matter? Because it's coming out, but why? What does it mean? Or maybe what doesn't it mean? Or what could you turn off? Or what could you change your thinking? Or what does this maybe mean that this is a stepping stone to, version 7 of the product, which I know nothing about, but when six comes out and 7 is coming out in a year's time, what does this make you think about what is coming around the corner, or this kind of thing? And so I always had a look at it, a little bit of a strategy bent of, looking into the future, because, any architect wants to be prepared. And even if it's a guess, you want to make an educated guess. And so I always loved, in a way, rubbing my crystal ball, not knowing anything, absolutely probably talking, good 50% rubbish, but hopefully with enough experience that rubbish may have been something that turned out to be at least something to think about.
Well, and it's definitely, as I said, I've been a longtime fan of your writing and your blog and just your approach. And I mean, I've always looked to folks like yourself, Jeff Barr, also the ever famous John, the AWS blogger, John Myers. He's really, really cool. I've always tried to sort of model how I approach the blogging and writing and speaking in that same sense that I've seen you folks be very successful in, because when you listen to it, it's much more than just sort of a feature rundown. And it's funny because it's very easy as technologists to get caught out, and we love like, oh, this is an amazing feature. And I've even done it internally, with products. I'm like, love this, but you just basically gave a feature walkthrough for an hour and no one knows why they should care about the 20 amazing things you just showed them. Yeah. Like they'd probably rather not see how amazing the features are, and they'd love to see an active use case. And that becomes I think where the evolution of how we do things. And again, that sort of goes to product building, product management, product marketing, advocacy. It's all based in it.
The fun of doing this at AWS is my personal blogging also definitely took a dive over the recent times, because also I was working in more traditional infrastructure, and we'd sort of got ourselves to a certain level, and then I wasn't doing anything new. I wasn't writing new stuff in Power CLI, or developing stuff for hyper converged stuff, these kind of infrastructure things. And so my personal blogging had sort of dried up a bit. And so coming to AWS and then having access to write my own stuff for the AWS compute blog, I mean, wow. And having amazing people internally to learn from. And, there's a review process, and, we've got people in our team who we review each other's blogs. And to, always that question of, why is this important? Why would somebody care? How they're going to show it? How can they try this out for themselves as quick as possible? And so, we haven't even been to any reInvent announcements, but I'd written some of the blog posts for those. And the whole ethos of writing that is, this was announced. You should be able to go to GitHub repository and maybe go to download a CLI tool or something, and then, type 3 or 4 commands, and it should deploy the whole thing. And then you can see the thing we've deployed. And then you can go and look at the code, and, you've got it working, and you do a request through an API endpoint, and you get a response, and like, okay, cool. Well, how did that actually work? Well, there's the code. Here's your explanation. There's the GitHub repository. There's the open source code. There's an explanation of how it's set up, the security ramifications of it, whatever. And that's the cool thing. So I'm loving having that opportunity to literally expand the cool stuff to write on.
Now, maybe a couple of quick rundown things of like new serverless bits that came out of reInvented. Actually, nothing like 5 minutes left. Like, let's just talk about what 3 weeks of announcements impacted. But I think the important thing was like why the approach is as much as important as the announcements, because then when people hear the announcements, they're like, oh, good golly, I know I can go to the documentation and I can find it. Go to GitHub and I can find it, right? It's cool. So
absolutely. Well, let's just talk about Lambda, because that always comes top of mind when people think about serverless, and that is a compute thing. And as I mentioned before, it's this always this big story of literally giving you access to the entirety of AWS's compute power without you having to become an expert in distributed computing. And I like that. We deal with all the scale problems. You deal with resources. You get CPU, you get memory, you get some storage. You configure your code. That's important. That's the addressable thing, the code, not the resources. You're not binding your function to a collection of machines or a pod or anything like that. You're just saying, I want this much memory, which is a little dial, which gives you some CPU cores as well. And then whether you spin up 18,000 cores in the back end or 1.8 cores, that's not your problem. And that's the driving philosophy about it, that that the less you have to think about from a distributing computing perspective, and then you get more time to build your own kind of stuff. And so we have large Lambda function sizes. So now up to 10 gig of memory, and that then correlates with the memory dial up to 6 virtual CPUs. So Lambda functions can still run for a max of 15 minutes, but that means before you used to have 3 gig of memory, and it could be up to 2 virtual CPUs. So, tripling that memory and CPU footprint could mean that something that was CPU bound, that ran in 45 minutes or just under 45 minutes, now runs in under 15 minutes. And so, 10 gig memory, 6 virtual CPUs, and then on the cost, 1 millisecond billing. So before, Lambda was charged per 100 milliseconds. And so if your function ran for 50 milliseconds, you basically were, you were being charged for 100. Ergo, on the other side, you were running 101 milliseconds, you were charged for 200 milliseconds. So now literally 100 millisecond billing, don't have to do a thing. It's just on. So literally some people are seeing their bills drop by, 70%. And, there's still some workloads out there that 70% translates even for a medium-sized company to saving $100 a month, which may not seem like a huge amount because their Lambda bill really isn't the big kind of bill. But if you're thinking interactive workloads or things behind an API, or machine learning kind of stuff, where some of the inference stuff I hear is really sort of actually quite short compute, this can save you a huge bunch of money. So that's the sort of two sides of stuff getting bigger and stuff getting cheaper. And then the other big one is the container image support. And this is a big thing because this is also serverless. We don't want serverless to be something that is too unique, that there's just so many new things I've got to do, and I don't really understand it, and it's a barrier in the way I've been doing things. So container image support is about being able to package your Lambda functions as container images. Use the Docker CLI, use the Docker file, and build your Lambda function. Now, Lambda then goes and caches that data around for you, so cold starts are not a problem, and can then run that function. Same execution environment, same isolation, and it still works in an event-driven model. So you're not running any arbitrary container on Lambda. This is a container image built for Lambda, but you're not having to worry about ports and sockets. You're not having to do anything like that. An event hits Lambda, off it goes and does that. So this helps developers sort of where they are. If you're comfortable building containers, your CI/CD pipeline is used to building container images. You've got maybe image scanning, all this kind of thing, and also allows up to 10 gig image sizes. So that's also a big thing. People using training models or, big bunch of dependencies, container image support allows for a new packaging format and far bigger. The size of that package can be a lot bigger. Lambda extensions is another super good thing. I wrote blog posts for that. I absolutely love the extensions. This is also another thing, is connecting Lambda, allowing you to either write your own tools or probably more likely plug in your partner's tools directly into the Lambda ecosystem. So you don't have to write your observability coding, observability stuff in your code. Some of the extensions from partners, and these are people like, Datadog and AppConfig, which is an AWS service, and Datadog and logging providers, Sumo Logic, and yeah, there's a whole bunch. I mean, they're literally, I think, 20 or 30 different third-party providers, and you just add an extension, which is a Lambda layer, to your function, job done. So your observability data gets sent out to any one of your providers, and you don't have to do anything else. Really be able to reduce code and really connect with your partners. Use your existing tools. Use your favorite existing tools for Lambda. So yeah, that's a super good one. Those are the big highlights. I mean, there are a whole bunch of other kind of things like AVX2 support, advanced vector extensions. So, CPUs can do some faster stuff. On their step functions, and API Gateway has now direct integrations. So you can add API Gateway actions to your step functions workflows. Step functions is our workflow automation and orchestration system. Super good if you're doing anything that needs to orchestrate anything. Look at step functions. Now you can reduce your Lambda functions. API Gateway and step functions talk together. Step functions also has synchronous express workflows. So, you can synchronously kick off something with step functions and wait for a reply. What else we got? Amazon Event Bridge, replay and archiving. So you can create archives for Event Bridge. And Event Bridge, if you're doing anything about events, ergo the name, Amazon Event Bridge, really powerful product. What else we got? Aurora Serverless v2. So this is, multi-AZ report, read replicas, global database support, more scalability. So if you're looking at Aurora Serverless v1, Aurora Serverless v2 is even better. I mean, that's just, I had a list and I just flicked through some of the kind of stuff, way more better with SAM, which is our serverless framework for doing local testing, is much better. Loads. We could carry on for hours just with the announcements. But yeah, I'm excited about the container image support. Brings Lambda and container devs much closer together. Containers is a big word that means a lot of things. I like to think, ultimately under the hood, Lambda is already doing a whole bunch of stuff that you would be doing with containers already. We've got, a greater isolation with our Firecracker isolation. You don't need to worry about schedulers or pods or Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or this kind of thing. That's all just built into the platform for you. And so if you used to playing and tinkering with containers or running them in production, sure, you can, carry on doing that with EC2, with Fargate, with ECS, EKS, all those kind of things. Or maybe Lambda, maybe something that you can start investigating as another way. So you can have even less infrastructure to manage.
When that really becomes the thing that there's an underlay somewhere that in a lot of ways, and I wouldn't pull you into having to say what is or isn't already being present, but abstracted away. I would hypothesize that a lot of these things were always containerized, or backed by API Gateway, backed by, these things are services that eventually became so widely used, like, okay, let's just push one above the abstraction and let it be consumable directly. And that's what's so cool. So it's when you're getting the first crack at container images in serverless, on Lambda, what you're probably getting is to what has been working for a long time. That's what I really enjoy about AWS tends to bring you something that's battle tested much more than like, I've got an idea, let's just see it, let's to run a proof of concept in a large community. Like, no, we've been running it for quite some time. So here's a new accessible endpoint where you can run it yourself, which is such a cool opportunity now. Again, as technologists, we can get excited about the bits, but then when you go further up, then you realize like, what's the business value of it?
Yeah,
You know,
and that's the one interesting thing about even talking back what we were talking about earlier about this sort of benefit of cloud, that, you know, with shrink wrapped software and everything, people have great ideas. Of course, they talk to customers. Of course, they test that and whatever. And, you know, AWS is always coming out with new products and features all the time. But I think people sometimes forget that actually we're operating and running those very same products. And, you know, that massive scale. I mean, I figure that somebody came out with reInvent that, you know, Lambda is running trillions of invocations per month. And so, yeah,
wow.
Lambda may be a cool kind of thing, but they, you know, there are trillions of invocations a month happening all over the world. And, you know, that kind of operational thing, we're running and operating Lambda. And there's, you know, there's not actually, Lambda conceptually is not really that much secret kind of source. It literally, you know, this is a bare metal instance of an EC2 service that runs a small little hypervisor, you know, connects to the Nitro system from AWS EC2, and then, you know, has Firecracker, which is this isolation mechanism, and runs just loads of micro VMs. So actually, you know, we're not even running really containers under the hood. It's actually a micro VM, but, you know, starts up in milliseconds. And these are just loads of little micro VMs, and we run, you know, concurrently. I don't even know. I have no idea how many micro VMs we're running concurrently, but that's it. And then the clever source is just making sure that your event, wherever it comes from, you know, from S3 to SQS or API gateway, hits that little micro VM, and your code runs. And, you know, that's kind of it. You know, we're not bending the fundamentals of time and space or physics or anything, and yeah, Lambda's cool.
That was interesting.
Hello.
It must be a problem with the cloud.
Exactly.
I
annoyed a Lambda.
I'm gonna have to edit that one, but we were on a good run there. I know we're at the edge of time, and if you got like 2 more minutes, let's just
I've got time.
And so, then because I want to make sure we finish that thought. So you're talking about, we basically. Yeah. So for those that are just catching up, we had a little minor burtation there, and that was probably because even though stuff's in the cloud, you still need a network to get to the cloud. And somebody's wireless, so I went a little sideways just there. So
somebody annoyed the Lambdas.
But Julian, you talked about this idea of. Yeah, that's right. But like you said, we're running all these like trillions of instantiations. You've got all this, you know, it's micro VMs running on metal. It's like you said, you are, you know, for the old phrases, dog fooding or whatever it is, like you effectively are running the infrastructure you have. So if anyone ever says like, hey, I wonder if it runs at scale, like we can confirm quite profoundly that it does. It does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. And I mean, you can imagine the number of operational stuff that we're doing all the time to make that better, faster, cheaper, more. And so like with 1 millisecond billing, you know, we make the economics work because, you know, we're doing optimizations all day, every day behind the scenes. So serverless literally just gets better as you use it. And, you know, if there's a performance thing, we're going to pass that on to you. We're going to find better ways of doing it. We're going to update some driver or some kind of package, which is going to make it more efficient or more secure or faster or cheaper. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the cool things of serverless is literally just in the background. It's going to get, even if you don't do anything, even if you don't take advantage of the new stuff, it's just going to get better behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine that case where somebody's running like, look, I just got a bill for 204 milliseconds. This is garbage. I refuse to pay this. I want to round down. Like, okay, we get it. But it is at one point we all talked about, and I'll say we, like the pundits of the world talked about this idea of this race to zero. And what it isn't a race to zero in that it's going to $0 like for a service. What it was a race to innovation, in that you could basically put back the results and the revenue from one area that's obviously successfully adopted and scaling, and then feed that back into other ecosystems. And then at the same time, feed it back to the customer directly in that, like you said, you're doing optimization so that you can go down to micro, millisecond billing, because now, there's no reason why they could do that. They needed to do that. Like that.
Yeah.
When people talk about customer centricity, I tell them, read everything you can, how AWS and the team describe customer centricity, and watch how it's played out. Versus most people, when they say customer centricity, they mean I love a customer that really loves my vendor product. That's not customer centricity. Customer centricity is doing something that's counter to maybe your future, because you're betting that the customer will love it enough that somebody else will also love it. And that's it plays out beautifully in the way you're talking about this stuff. And
and I mean, there's no hidden agenda, even with the 1 millisecond billing. It's like, we know that there are our customers who are spending a vast amount on Lambda, and we don't want cost to be a blocker for them. And so if we can reduce it to millisecond billing, sure, we're going to lose, immediately day one after that's turned on, we're going to be losing money, because yesterday we were charging 100 milliseconds. Today we're charging 1 millisecond. But we're going to be then creating a whole new set of workloads that people are going to be going, well, that's going to work for me now. I'm now going to be able to do X. And the whole idea is to give people more flexibility, give people more agility, and one by one, if we can remove those little blockers, those little things that make it not possible to use the service, well, that's where we're going to keep that's where we're going to keep going.
And the other thing as well, which often it's hidden behind things because they don't want to be running to the press releases with it. It's like, if you go back through the annual report stuff and you see stuff like I forget what the exact number was, it's like $1 billion was given in grants to startups and small community, organizations, to allow them to leverage services. And that, somebody will always read that as like, oh, well, they're just getting somebody to use the services. Well, I call it empowering people. And if they then through that are now adopting services and growing their business together with AWS as a partner, I still see the customer and the community in that far more than I see the chasing revenue, because they had every opportunity to not give that money in the first place. And that means that people don't have the services, people don't have the access. This really idea of ubiquitous access to the cloud it's real. It's so cool. Anyways, I'm excited to buy it. And like I said, I'm also excited about the nerd bits, which is like,
exactly.
So
that's
many.
The cool bit,
I'll always be torn. As much as I tell people, like, it's not about the speeds and feeds, like, I'm pretty excited about the speeds and feeds myself sometimes, but it happens to the best of us. So Julian, thank you very much for this. And if folks want to get involved and start their journey towards serverless hero goodness and just trying out the world of serverless, where can they find you writing, and where can they catch up with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I realized I didn't even give my Twitter handle in the beginning, but it's Julian_Wood. So yeah, please, I'd love to talk to you, Julian_Wood on Twitter. And actually the best place to find out about all things serverless on AWS is a newish site we've launched, which is serverlessland.com. And that's a super aggregation site where all the blogs, all the video content, the events, there was a dedicated page to reInvent with all that kind of stuff. And there's going to be way more coming. So instead of navigating a whole bunch of YouTubes and a whole bunch of blogs, just go to serverlessland.com, and there's just loads of content, and it's being continually updated all the time. So that's for a one-stop shop. That's the easiest kind of way. And then, if you've got, comments or nitpicks or suggestions or anything on serverless, please, get in touch. I mean, I'm still loving my time in AWS. I sort of pinch myself that I've actually got this is actually a real job. And I get amazing, to do it. I get to talk to people like you, and I get to play with products, and I get to, inform how products are even created, which is super awesome. And I'm, having a lot of fun. I know some people don't enjoy AWS and it doesn't work for them. And, working for a big tech company can be difficult. And I super appreciate that. But I'm sort of pinching myself that I've managed to tread this path, and absolutely loving it. And really happy to reach out, particularly for infrastructure people, who wanting to know about serverless, or who are, either intimidated or have burning questions, or just don't, are annoyed that there are actually servers in serverless, whatever it is. Whatever it is, more than happy to chat. And let's keep the conversations going, keep the community going. This is there may be bits and bytes flowing across a wire, but it's still very much a people-centric business. Love to be in touch with anybody who's interested.
We all get there together. That's the advantage of it, and it's well deserved, my friend. When I heard that you got the role, I thought, oh yeah, they've picked a good one. Because
thank you.
It's really neat when you can see that pairing of people that are going to really love and appreciate the opportunity, and then obviously the team, they get a huge win in that, having you on board. So I'm glad to see it continuing to evolve and really stuff. And again, sort of remote opportunities is that AWS is spread all about the world, and so to see that in different time zones, different representation, different geographies, it's just such a huge, great opportunity. Like I said, maybe not for all, but I think you've done well and continue to do so.
Well, thank you very much. I take inspiration from you as doing advocacy for the years that you've done it. I've always appreciated the way you've handled it, and so also you may not know it, but there are many things you've said, written, spoken about, or shown over the years that is some are working its way into the way AWS will do stuff. So a little bit nice. Of that DiscoPosse magic, DiscoPosse cloud magic.
I better be careful what I say
everywhere.
Now.
Never.
Excellent, Julian. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.